The conclusion of the Torah portion we read this morning finds the Israelites just after the dramatic salvation they experienced at the Red Sea, traveling for 3 days without finding water. Finally, they arrive at a place called Marah, so named for the undrinkably bitter waters they found there. At God's instruction, Moses throws a particular tree into the water which serves to sweeten it, making it potable for the people. The rabbinic commentators are divided as to the meaning of this enigmatic narrative. According to some, it's about the Israelites developing trust in God's benevolent leadership. Just after they left behind the oppressive servitude of Egypt, and particularly the Pharaoh who sought to repress them with his every decree, they now began to learn to follow the dictates of a God who, like Pharaoh, imposes commands upon them, but this time with their best interests at heart. Other commentators explain this episode more allegorically, and in their view, the water the Israelites lacked was actually the spiritual sustenance of Torah, which the prophet Isaiah metaphorized as water. The tree with which Moses sweetened the water for the people also represents Torah study, which in Proverbs is called Eitz Chayim, a tree of life for those who grasp onto it. So according to this perspective, the Israelites were not learning to obediently follow God's commands, but rather they were learning to study on their own, not to blindly follow the dictates sent down from heaven, but to create a community from the ground up, one sustained by learning, by discourse, and by debate. Indeed, the rabbis understood from this story that there should never be 3 consecutive days without the sustaining and refreshing waters of Torah study, and they so instituted public Torah readings into the liturgy each Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat morning. Speaking of water and the shortage thereof, in an op-ed written just last week, the prominent Jewish mega-philanthropist Ronald Lauder reasserted his oft-stated position that the greatest crisis humankind faces is not COVID-19, but water. The evidence suggests he is not wrong. Between the exploding global population, industrialization and pollution, and even the effects of climate change, fully 2/3 of the world may face regular shortages of clean water as soon as 2025. Lauder argued that the leadership to overcome this challenge should be the provenance of private philanthropy first and foremost, not democratic government. He says in his experience at the leadership of the Jewish National Fund, democratic governments were too fatally beholden to the short-term interests of their constituents. In contrast, philanthropy has the freedom to develop a multi-generational vision and possesses the will to see it through. However, as Stanford's political philosopher Rob Reich has argued, philanthropy, which is guided by the intuitions and the biases of ultimately a small number of people, is historically not adept at solving the root causes of the problems it seeks to address. In fact, Reich sees the growing inequality in Western countries, the degradation of the social safety nets and regulatory frameworks that provide essential services and protections, the disillusionment by so many in the ability of politics and public policy to provide real solutions to the problems they face in their lives, and the growing numbers and influence of mega-philanthropists as all manifestations of the same dynamic, as he would say, the same corrosive dynamic. So the formative experiences of the Israelites in the wilderness challenge us to consider the best way forward for our own ever-thirstier world. Do we move towards the strong vision and seeming omnipotence of a powerful leadership, or towards a truly collaborative, engaged, educated democracy? As we retread the path taken by those who first left Egypt, the way we answer this question may make all the difference as we try to approach our own promised land. Chag Sameach.